Greetings, fanboys and fangirls. Jared here with another video from Fanboys Forever. Today we're going to be covering something a little different compared to what we usually do here on the channel. You know, it's not very often that I kind of go with websites like, say, Temu or something like that, because a lot of the time the products that you're getting are knockoffs from those kinds of sites. But I have decided to dip my toe into AliExpress because they were featuring a figure that I just couldn't pass up for a price that was equally enticing. If you want to see what classic toy line from the 80s that we have a classic facsimile of right here in this weird black trash bag looking thing, then stick around and we'll open it together. I ordered the cheapest version of this I could and paid only $26 and some taxes. And that is a steal, I think, for what this is, but we'll see. Maybe I've been completely misled and I didn't get what I thought I would. You'll probably recognize who this is supposed to be as soon as you see it. One of the reasons why I decided that it was alright to order from a site like AliExpress for something like this was because this isn't an official product anyway. You'll soon see that the line it's based on, it's kind of an abandoned property, and there really isn't anybody doing official product for it. There's a lot of bubble wrap here, so I can also see that even though I got the non-boxed version, it's still in the plastic tray, so that's a good surprise. I just kind of thought it would be in a bag. Maybe you can already tell, but yes, it is Marshall Bravestarr. So, I know that this is kind of a departure from what I usually talk about here on the channel. As you guys know, this channel is mainly dedicated to He-Man content. But truth be told, there's almost no brand that's more He-Man adjacent than Bravestarr. So if you're not familiar, Bravestarr was a toy line from the 1980s from Mattel. Much like He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, this toy line was bolstered by an animation project and movie from Filmation and Lou Scheimer. Now sadly, this would prove to be Filmation's last big series before they really went out of business. So it's really unfortunate, but there was always rumblings that Marshall Bravestarr here would be joining with He-Man and that they were meant to be in continuity before the idea was squashed. But in my mind, in my heart, I've always considered Bravestarr to somehow, some way, be in continuity with Masters of the Universe. I wanted a Bravestarr figure, and I have ever since I was a kid. You see, I was more of a kid of the early 90s. Even though I was born in the 80s while Masters of the Universe was still a thing, I really didn't come of age to start playing with action figures until, say, 1991 or so. By that time, things like Bravestarr were long gone. Instead, all I was left with was 4Kids VHS releases, like the one my dad picked up for me at a gas station. They were having some kind of promotion, I remember, and we got to choose a VHS tape, and I thought Bravestarr was the coolest looking one. Took it home and I was instantly in love with it. I thought it was just awesome. Since then, I've been really smitten by Bravestarr and just thought it was a great idea to have this kind of futuristic sci-fi kind of western thing, and I always thought it had just such a unique vibe, and I've always loved and appreciated it. Well, I found out that there were pretty much two options for me if I wanted a figure from this series these days, and neither one of them are official, as it were, as it seems that Bravestarr is almost an abandoned property at this point. I could either go with the Ramen Toys version, which is more of the 6.5, 7-inch kind of scale, and pretty expensive, $100 for that figure, or I could go with the kind of more 5.5 to 6-inch scale Bravestarr figure from Dasin? I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, but we'll say Dasin Toys. And this company does handle some really cool anime releases. I don't have any of their stuff, but they look really neat. And this is actually the far more animation accurate version. This is the one that even just flat out says Bravestarr on it. It's called the Sheriff.
Look at me. I'm the sheriff.
All right, let's go home, Sheriff. Come on.
Yeah. All right, people.
But the packaging and everything, if you get the packaging version, and even on the base stand there, just flat says Bravestarr, and it's straight up animation perfect. So it's really funny that nobody really cares about Bravestarr to the point to where you can just release this and nobody's going to say anything. Certainly Mattel won't, because they're not doing anything with it. And then you've got like Ramen Toys being a little more careful, calling them, I think, the Marshall, and never putting Bravestarr or any of the official iconography on anything, and changing the designs just ever so slightly to where it can be maybe sort of legally distinct. But hey, that's enough background. I'm excited to open this up, and excited also that I only paid $27 or $28 after taxes, and this does appear to be the actual product. At first I kind of wondered, but I saw a lot of good reviews, so I thought, well, surely this is the real deal. And yes, it is as real a deal as something that is third party in the first place and kind of skirting copyright anyway can be, I guess. All right, let's go ahead and crack this guy open. Okay, so let's get Marshall Bravestarr out. You can see they do have some plastic over them to protect the paint job, which I appreciate. It does have a much heftier feel than I thought it would. I actually thought this thing would be really, really cheap feeling, but no, he actually feels good. Yeah, joints feel nice. Plastic quality seems really decent, especially for such a cheap release. I'll be honest with you, I have no idea how I got this guy for as cheap as I did. I tried to go back and look and see if there was any more at that price. I never saw any others. Since I had never ordered anything from AliExpress and had never had an account with them, I kind of wonder if it was some kind of promotional pricing to get you hooked, as it were, to get you to do an account or something. I don't know how it happened, but however I got this guy for $28, shipped to my door from China or wherever it was from, international shipping through customs, I got it, so I'm just happy it's here. All right, so he has one of those cool base stands that we're starting to see with some companies like Hiya Toys, and you can see that if you open it up, he comes with all sorts of cool alternative hands and even a grabber and a little thing you can plug in. So I love bases like this where you can actually store the accessories. It's just another way to keep up with all those little things. He does come with a much larger grabber here that you can attach that other piece onto to secure him. I do believe that you're supposed to be able to plug this thing into the base stand. So far it's showing a little bit of resistance, but I think you just kind of have to, finagle it in there, and then it works out just fine, but it wasn't exactly a smooth fit. And you have Bravestarr's hat, which I've always thought was such a cool design because it has the little antenna on there. You have the giant kind of gun that he has. Of course, the Marshall does not love firearms so much and only uses them if he has to. You have another kind of little gun that he's got with him. Love the design of this thing. It looks Old West and Star Wars at the same time. You got a ponytail piece here to go on, I believe, with the hat. And to me, these are the coolest accessories. You have alternate faces. You have kind of the Bravestarr yelling face. Fierce smile, I guess I would call it. Dead serious looking stage right. Teeth gritted looking stage left. And of course the standard head that comes on the figure of just neutral. Man, I just think these are fantastic. The people at Dasin Toys who designed these, clearly lovers of the source material and clearly huge Bravestarr fans to be able to finagle something like that. Of course, I'm not going to mess around too much before I just show you flat out what the scale of this guy is. It's advertised to be in that 1/12 scale, but the truth is this guy is in the very bare minimum of what can be considered 1/12 scale. It's kind of a funny thing to discuss, but there's always been kind of discrepancies in the 6-inch scale, especially when it comes to the dichotomy between domestics and imports. So in other words, basically what that means is that imports, Japanese kind of figures or Asian market figures, tend to be smaller and be considered in a 6-inch scale, whereas domestic figures, those American kind of 6-inch lines, tend to be larger. Say for instance, I could take a G.I. Joe classified figure and put him right beside of him like low light, and low light's going to be pretty significantly larger than this guy. And G.I. Joe Classified isn't even the biggest example of a domestic 6-inch figure. So just be aware of that. And I know that that initially really put me off of getting this guy. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized that this figure really wouldn't be hanging out with my G.I. Joes, and this guy would probably pretty much be in isolation. So I didn't really know what I had to worry about there. Of course, he is much larger than a standard 3 3/4 scale figure, like say Shipwreck from G.I. Joe 25th Anniversary. So here's the exciting part, and I'm not going to bury the lead too much. He is pretty much in scale with say a Masters of the Universe Origins figure. Now that doesn't mean his proportions work. or anything like that. But it's just about the same size. Maybe Bravestarr is, a little bit taller than he ought to be to go with a line like that, but really it's not too far off. Here's He-Man in some of his Turtles of Grayskull armor. Looks like he's rough and ready and visiting New Texas. And you can see that it's really not that much of a stretch to have them together. Like I said, the one thing is the proportions. There's no real way that they work together proportionally, with Bravestarr's head being so much smaller and He-Man and the other Masters figures being so much larger. But hey, height-wise, it works. So the very best comparison that you can do for scale, and the most similar in a line that he does scale with very well, is SH Figuarts. It's probably the very smallest of the import releases that you can get that's still considered 1/12 scale. And sure enough, he's exactly the same height pretty much as my Kamen Riders. Alright, so I kind of think Bravestarr looks a little weird without his hat, so that's important to me that he has that. So let me go ahead and show you how it works. The head easily comes off of just a little ball joint system they have right here. Here's where it gets interesting. The hair just lifts off, and each of the heads, no matter which expression you choose, has a little kind of landing pad right there. So let's go ahead and do a different expression so that we can kind of give each one their time in the sun. And I'm a big fan of the mischievous grin right here because it looks just like those frames from the Filmation show. And you can see that the hat plugs in kind of just a port right there. And then you can see that he's missing the back of his hair, and that's where the ponytail piece comes into play. So the ponytail actually goes in first, and then the face goes in. If you look close enough, you can see, I guess, a little seam above the sideburns there, but it's really not that noticeable because the hair is black. And yeah, I gotta say, I am really liking this. He really does remind me of the animation. And so far, that's my big takeaway with this guy, is he is so animation accurate. If you want a Filmation type of Bravestarr, then you'll want to go with this one because, I mean, it really does have that look to it. Something I didn't mention before, and we'll talk about this in Articulation a little bit more, is that he has these drop-down hips. So the thing about drop-down hips is when you pull them out like this, it boosts his height as a result of that. So I guess if you wanted to, you could artificially boost his height. It does give some kind of unsightly seams there. I mean, it's nothing too bad. So I guess bringing back like a G.I. Joe classified figure, and I guess, it does cause him to be able to be fudged just a little bit easier. It's still, probably not selling it as much as it should be. That kind of is in that 5.5 inch world, but also a little bit in that 6 inch world. I would almost call this a 5.75 inch figure. All right, so let's definitely look at some of those accessories. Let's see. Yes, the hands switch very easily. I also love this little tree. It reminds me very much of some of the kind of Kamen Rider candy figures that I collect that have little trees of hands like that. And oh yeah, that is actually a great connection. That's awesome. So there's his trigger hand right there. And we'll go ahead and give him his pistol. Now I will say that he doesn't have any kind of holster that I can see. But the truth is, I have never paid enough attention to the animation model to know if he's always packing a holster or if he just kind of ends up having a gun when he needs one. And definitely there's been some tender loving care when it comes to making sure that that hand fits. The grip is really, really good there for the gun, so there's definitely no problem with him holding that. So that looks really good. Yeah, let's get rid of that hip gap there. So let's bring him back down a little bit. But yeah, the Marshal looks really fantastic holding his gun. Like I said, even though Bravestarr does not use it very often, only when necessary. And then he has more of the cannon piece that looks a little bit more like 3030's gun. And it doesn't necessarily have a trigger, so we really need to use the other hand for that one, which is just more of a gripping hand. And that one works a fair bit better. So this too is a good option, and it looks really nice. All right, I'll show you my favorite alternative hands for this guy, and that's his A-OK hands. He does have open hands, but I don't think we'll need them. He has two of these, everything's A-OK kind of thing, or you can kind of cheat it and have him use this for his hat tip right here. Either way works perfectly, so I'm really a big fan of that, and it gives a lot of personality to the figure. But let's have something a little less casual for his face. Like I said, I'm a big fan of how easy that is to switch while still being secure enough. Let's go for something a little more crazy and intense, and that is the Marshall kind of yelling. And we can see that that looks really good for kind of dramatic photography right there. And I really love the expression. I think that that is just intense enough. I really like how you can put him with other ruffians and things like that. Kind of have some great standoffs, like the Hawk P40 right here from the Mezco 112 Collective line. He definitely looks like a denizen of New Texas, some kind of outlaw. And here we have him in his Dark Knight Returns issue 2 kind of Batman pose right here, ready to fist fight with that sideways glance head. So I like that. Looks like he's ready for a standoff. This is also a great time to talk about articulation. The articulation definitely reminds me more of, say, an import figure, which is definitely a compliment in this case, so he's a lot more like a figure art. I find that I really do have to press down to make sure that hat is as low as it should be, because it does kind of like to ride up if you don't make sure of that. With that, there is a joint under the head where the neck connects, and you can see that you can get it to go up about that much, so you can raise the chin up. You can bury the chin down a little ways. Not only that, but there is another joint right there where the neck meets the collarbone, so you can do all kinds of other motion. So combining these two together, you actually have some pretty decent range right there. Definitely the ponytail and the hair back there kind of keeps you from bringing the chin out even more, but honestly, I think that this is plenty. So you can see that there's a really good range here. You can bring them all the way around. You can bring them out, and you can get almost to that 90-degree point. So that works pretty well. I do like that there's a little bit of extra bulk there to keep it from just looking so spindly. You can see that there is a cut there at the upper bicep. There is a double jointed elbow there, and it works really well. It's a little squeaky, as import figures also tend to be sometimes. You can see that we have a rotation at the wrist. We do have a nice hinge up and down, and the good thing is the hinge itself, the ball hinge right there, just like a figure art, can rotate all the way around, so you're never stuck with a certain way that the hand is going to rotate, and I wish more domestic figures would pick up on that. With the ab crunch, it is crazy good. You have a top ab crunch that goes all the way, either way, left or right, and it goes really deep forward and really far back, and it looks pretty natural no matter what you do. And then at the waist, you have just about the same amount of range. So it's absolutely crazy what you can get. And it really does look natural. I don't really know how to explain it, but it's one of the more natural ab crunches I've ever seen in a figure, so wow. And of course you can twist that waist right there. Everything covered by that belt to keep it looking natural. Like I said earlier, you do have drop down hips, so that can get you with those really nice high kicks, but you can also bring them back in to look more natural. And you can also do the splits, but that's about as far as they go. Honestly, it would look ridiculous for him to split any more than that. There is no kind of rotation up here at this. You would almost think there would be, but there isn't. There is a double jointed knee, which works perfectly. There isn't a rotation at the boot cut here, and that really surprised me, so that's a little disappointing. He does have really good ankles, though, with all kinds of ankle rocker pivot. There is a nice little hinge there that has plenty of motion, and even a toe hinge, and even the bottoms of the boots are nicely detailed while we're down here. Speaking of detail, the paint itself is something that I really didn't get to talk too much about, but instead of just having this be flat colors, if you look around, there's all kinds of nice subtle kind of airbrushing going on. If you look up here, you can see a little bit of orange being brushed into the yellow, and down here conversely there's a little bit of yellow being brushed into the orange. So it's really nice because it gives kind of this subtle shading effect and keeps the figure from just looking cheap. Even on the back, we have all the details that we remember from the series, including the back of the harness, and you can see the ponytail really well. And now we have another head sculpt here. I really like this one because he kind of has a sly grin. And here's Bravestarr in more of that Old West, New Texas diorama that I have set up, and I think he looks suitably cool for that area. And one more head that we really didn't get to look at is him looking the other way, but I think you get the picture. So you can see I've got Metal Botto riding high over here. I definitely have him kind of westerned out a little bit with a red hat that I found from a Phantom of the Opera Mego figure. But we're going to buck him off the horse for a second, and instead we're going to put the Marshall in there. Thanks to the height being a really good match for the Masters of the Universe Origins stuff, you can see that Bravestarr can be integrated into pretty much any kind of vehicle or playset that this line has to offer. And he looks really, really good here. So, of course, Stridor is one of the cheaper items you can find in the entire line because he was very much overproduced, and you can usually find him for around $5 or $6 in some places, at least 10 or so. So this is a great little ride since there's no 3030 yet, so he looks really good till then. And if you want him to look more like 3030, you can just take the helmet off, and you get an even more kind of Bravestarr adjacent look. Alright, so let's talk final thoughts about this guy. I cannot guarantee that you will ever have the same kind of almost fluke or introductory pricing or whatever it was that I did on something like AliExpress to get this guy at like $28. Usually what I've been seeing online was that people were finding the boxed version on different sites for somewhere around $40. I can't necessarily speak to that experience, but what I can tell you is this was worth my $28 and far more. And I do believe that it would probably at least be comfortably worth $40. You have a figure that is easily as good as any of the Figuarts that I own or have owned in the past. It really does have a really wide range of accessories and alternate heads and looks. It comes with a great base stand, but it can stand just fine on its own. The accuracy to the Filmation model sheets is just great. This guy is instantly recognizable in any of the head sculpts. It's not just one or two, and you can tell exactly what they were going for. The articulation is really effective. The paintwork is really nice. There was no slop or any kind of QC issues. I come away extremely impressed by this release, and I'll be curious to see what this company does in the future. I really wasn't sure what to expect with this package arriving from overseas, but I ended up being absolutely shocked by what I got. So let me know down below in the comments, were you one of the people who got into Bravestarr back in the day? Have you ever seen it? Is it something you've never heard of before? I strongly suggest you give this show a shot, especially the movie that explains the origin. All of these things are free on YouTube if you want to watch. As I said, it almost feels like Bravestarr at times is kind of like an abandoned IP. So with that in mind, it seems like these third-party companies have realized this as well and are trying their hand at doing different versions of Bravestarr. I'm thinking about getting the Ramen Toys Marshall sometime to show on the channel, and we can do a proper comparison of the two and decide once and for all which one is the better alternative when it comes to having a Bravestarr figure in that 6-inch scale. Well guys, that will do it for me. Of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, especially if you like what you've seen here today. And don't forget to like the video and comment down below. All of these things really helps the channel, and we really appreciate it. Remember, if you really appreciate the work I do here on the channel, there is always the thanks button to help the channel grow. God bless you and yours, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever, Fanboy out.